Help us to give you the attention that you deserve. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. You're familiar with the Beatles song, All You Need Is Love. The catchy tune, the catchy little catch that it has, the beat to it. Maybe a little simplistic. Well, it is a little simplistic. But love is a remedy for a lot. It's a problem solver for a lot of the issues that we face in this earth. Because if it's a love of the proper degree, it will lead us to action. It's not just some emotion. It's not just some feeling. It leads us to things. And not meaning that, as the world would define it, that we accept sin and that we compromise with sin and then put that under the umbrella, oh, that's love. That's not the love God speaks of. But there are things that we can still learn about it. That's what I hope that we're able to do this morning. And before we even begin our lesson, what I want us to do is just look at some various words that the New Testament uses for love. It's one of those unique words that the English language doesn't have something that we can explain like this as easily, but we just have the word for love, and we throw it out in all kinds of ways. I love spaghetti. I love watching ball games. I love my kids. So does that mean I love spaghetti as much as I love my kids? No. But we use that word. We use that one word for love, and we just kind of throw it out with anything, whether we like it a little bit or whether we are deeply attached to something. We just use the word love. That's not how the Greek language used it. There were a lot of times in the Bible when the word love is translated into the English. But the Greek had a specific word for it. It meant something different. There were different levels, I guess, to try to make this make some sense for us. And what I want us to do is look through some of those words. The word storge. Are you with me in 2 Timothy chapter 3? Some of the translations have this. It's in that long section of perilous times. There are hard times coming, and here are some signs of it. And one of those was in verse 3, without love. Most of the translations have without natural affection. That's the Greek word for storge that sometimes is translated love. It's what to describe this natural affection. Think of it as just a bond you have with some people. A comfortableness that you have with some people. A sense of belonging that you have. Usually this word, this storge, this natural affection, a lot of times it's talking about family relationships. The comfortableness that you have with family. Kick your shoes off, throw them up on the side of the couch. You wouldn't do that around visitors. But this is my family. And there is a bond, and there is a closeness, and it is natural. And that's the word for storge. You love them because they're yours. Yeah, he's a crazy uncle, but he's my crazy uncle. Even animals have some of that. The mama bear who has that natural affection for the cub. And that's what Paul is telling Timothy. There's going to come a time when we're worse than animals. There are people who don't even have an affection for things that animals have. That's why that is in this list with murderers and drunkeners and all the rest. Even animals have it. They're going to be worse than animals. And we know people that are like that. They don't have this natural affection. Romans 12, the word for love there, has that same connotation. The word eros, where we get our word erotic, which, sadly, this is the word for love that probably most of our culture would be most familiar with. This exhilaration, an erotic love that we might associate with relating to sexual fulfillment. Hebrews chapter 13 talks about the wedding bed that's undefiled. Erotic love would be a part of that. Genesis chapter 29, it would have been the Hebrew, not the Greek, but that idea when it was describing to us the connection, the feelings that Rachel and Jacob had. Erotic love is real. God gave us that desire. And that's why the wedding bed is not defiled. And then what Satan does, what Satan is an expert at, he takes something good and twists it. And when he gets done with it, it's not good anymore. He takes what's good and turns it into something evil. And now all of a sudden, there's fornication. Now there is adultery. There is lasciviousness, and etc., etc. You look back into the history of the kingdom, you look at the event of Amnon, Absalom's brother with Tamar, and we just see all this, where just this love, this emotion gets out of hand. Have a culture that in many people has nothing but this. And this is not enough to build a relationship on, but it is Bible descriptive. It is sometimes how love is used, speaking of the eros love. One we'll probably be a little bit more familiar with, the phileo love. What would be best defined as brotherly love, we think of it as. The true definition is warm affection. I mean, just the studying of the words of it. This warm affection you have toward those. Indeed, brotherly love. That's why Philadelphia, taking its name from phileo, the city of brotherly love, they call themselves. That's their self-proclaimed nickname. Titus chapter 2 speaks about that. In John 11, that's the word when it talks about Jesus going to Lazarus' grave. The one whom you love is sick. That was phileo love. There was a warm affection between those two men. There was a closeness that they had one toward another. And we're familiar with this. There are people that you and I, we're just very close to. There is a warmth to that relationship. Sometimes it's because of commonalities. As the saying goes, two peas in a pod. There are people we just think alike. And we like the same things. And there's just so much that connects us. And I know there's people here who can say that sometimes you have this warmer affection with your brethren than you do the storge affection with flesh and blood. I mean, let's just be honest. Especially if you come out of denominationalism, or it might be that you have more in common with your spiritual brethren than you do your fleshly brethren. There are some that we just have, the only thing we have in common with them is DNA. The only thing we have in common with them is the same set of parents, but it's the spiritual brethren that there's this very warm affection. Because although the blood may be from different, saved by the same blood. And that's the commonality that trumps all the rest. I know there's people who know exactly what that emotion is. That's a phileo love. This warmthness, this closeness. Then there's one more. There's the agape love. The highest level of love. We'll talk about why in just a moment. The idea that the true, just looking at the words, it's just this unconquerable benevolence. Unconquerable means it can't be broken. It's an affection that nothing can sever. We won't look at all these verses, but in Matthew chapter 5, when it talks about love your enemies, and then he goes on to describe what an enemy might be. It might be someone who's hurting you, despitefully using you, persecuting you. Now, hang on a second. Love them. Well, that's not natural affection. Love the ones who might be hurting and persecuting and doing evil to you. That's certainly not erotic affection. Love the ones who are hurting you. There's something deeper to that, just this warmthness. And that's what makes the agape love a higher level love. It's a decision. Storge, that natural affection. Natural means natural. That erotic. You don't feel that with everyone. Everybody in here has, what would be the word? Everybody in here has a type. Certain people are attracted to certain character traits of other people, and there are others that you don't find attractive. There's nothing wrong in admitting that. brotherly love, that warmth, affection, be honest. We don't feel that with everybody. We don't have that warmth. Agape is a decision. It is a mindset. I will love them. I will want their good. I will do what I can to bring about their good. Does that sound familiar? That's exactly the kind of love God showed for us. In John 3:16, God so loved the world that wasn't natural affection. Erotic, that wasn't erotic, eros love. It wasn't phileo love. It was an unconquerable decision. I want to do good for them. I'm going to do good for them. And that is what he's asking us to have. It's higher than others because it's a choice. It's a decision. It's an action, not just a feeling. And that unconquerable part of it, nothing we encounter can change our feeling or our willingness to help. Let me give you an example. And this is going to take us back to our purpose of this study. But turn to Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians 5. All this just to get us kind of started. Long introduction is what this has been. But in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, husbands, love your wives. I'm giving you one guess what love that is. Is that some natural thing? Is this talking about erotic things? Is this talking about some warmth? No, it's going beyond that. Go home, get your Strongs out. Most of you probably don't have to do that anymore. Get your iPad out. You can find out which love that is. It's the agape love. It's the higher order of love. It's the love God showed for us. Husbands, it's a decision. It's a choice. And so we're going to talk today. We talked earlier about the work of the wife. We're now going to talk about the love of the husband. A lot of times, just the bluntness of it, a lot of times, a family being right, that depends on the husband being right. And all too often, that doesn't happen. Let's just read the text. I've got it printed up, but let's just read it together. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify it and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that should be holy, without blemish. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loves his wife loves himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, even as the Lord the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, shall be joined to his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I'm speaking concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. Let's just take this text. How many times has it been read? How many times does it get parts of it pulled out? The answer to that question is probably going to be a whole lot different than the answer to this question. How many times does it get applied? Not asking how many times is it read. As James would say, not asking how many times it's been heard, how many times does it get done? We want to be doers and not hearers of the word. So let's talk about this love that God has required husbands to have. And the first thing, let's make sure we understand, he has given in this relationship, husbands have taken on the role of Christ. And that is not misspeaking. Go back to verse 25. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church. That ought to take every man's breath away when we understand what exactly that's saying. Because Jay just did a good job reminding us through Scripture and through inspiration by reading it to us. He reminded us of how much love Christ had for the church. That was a decision that Christ made. Husbands have been given this role, even as Christ. Newer versions use the word just as Christ. He is the pattern. And the love that he had is the love that husbands have to have. If it means anything less than that, you need to let us know what it means. Even as Christ loved the church means something. Christ's love was a sacrificial love. He put others ahead of himself. You know, you can have a storge love and be selfish. It's natural affection. You can have some erotic love and be selfish. The world's full of it. You can have some phileo love and be selfish. You know what you can't have? You can't have agape love and be selfish. You can't have the love God showed the world by giving of his Son, and you can't have the love Christ showed the church by giving of his blood. Selfishness and agape aren't working together. One's eliminating the other. This sacrificial love is the crowning proof of how much his church meant to him, how much his people meant to him. And let's just be honest, selfishness is one of the killers of marriages. It's just hand in hand with divorce. Priorities are going to be impacted when there's selfishness involved. The idea of putting others ahead of self, like Philippians 2 requires, that's going to be hindered when selfishness is involved. And we've all experienced that. We don't have to talk hypothetical. This is not howdy-doody hour. Every adult in this room, in times, has acted selfishly. We know what drives it. We know what it looks like. We know what the result of it is. We've all done selfish things in selfish times. Just make sure we understand that in that moment, we weren't practicing agape love. We weren't practicing love that puts others ahead of ourselves. It wasn't the love that Christ showed for his church. It's a role of Christ, guys. And don't try to water that down. It's commanded. Are you with me in verse 25? Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Verse 28, so men ought to love their wives as their own body. Verse 33, love your wife even as yourself. This is a command, not a suggestion. How do we handle other commands? We know what he says. We know what he wants. We know what he requires. And we either do it or we don't. And if we don't do it, what's that called each and every time? That's called sin. And we get that with, God said not to covet. So if I'm covetous, that's a sin. I got to change. God said not to commit adultery. I've got to change. God said not to lie. I've got to change. God said love your wife. And if you're not doing that, you got to change. This is no different from any other command on any other page, on any other inspired word. This is commanded. And it's regardless of how the wife may behave, by the way. Drop back up into verse 21. Speaking not to husbands and wives, but to all. In verse 21, he's just talking to Christians. Submit yourselves one to another in reverence of Christ, in fear of Christ. He didn't say, verse 21, submit to those that earn it, deserve it. No, you do it because it's reverence. Well, this would be the very same thing. He didn't say love your wife because she's lovable. He didn't say you love your wives because it's easy all the time. He said, you love your wives because that's how Christ loved the church. And that's the role that you've been given and you've been commanded to. He tells us who we love. Turn back to just a page. Actually, go the other way. Turn back to Colossians chapter 3. We're studying Colossians. We'll be looking at this in probably 3 or 4 weeks. Colossians 3:19. Husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. Does that sound like a suggestion? No, this is a command, and sometimes we don't take it as such. So now we got to go deeper than that then. Turn to 1 John chapter 4. 1 John chapter 4. Why is this such a serious thing? Why does this command need to be honored and need to be recognized? It's because God has that right. And we can't say we love Him if we're not loving who He tells us to love. Look in 1 John chapter 4, verse 20. You'll be familiar with it. If a man says, I love God and hates his brother, he's a liar. He that loves not his brother whom he has seen, how can he love God whom he has not seen? And this commandment have we from Him, that he who loves God loves his brother also. What is the point of that? The point is love for God necessitates loving who He tells us to love. He says, what John is saying, we're trying to make an application. Don't tell me you love me and you don't love your brethren. Well, by extension, husbands, don't pretend and try to make ourselves feel better. Oh, I love God. God is first in my life. I love God. If we love Him, we will love exactly who He tells us to love. He commanded us to love our wife. And if we have lost that, then we are failing in the command, just as if we were coveting, just as if we were lying, just as if it's a sin. I don't think I've said that yet. I should have said that 5 minutes ago. If loving our wife is a command, and it sure seems like Ephesians 5 made it one, it sure seems like Colossians 3 made it one. If that's a command, and we're not doing it properly, it's called repenting. I don't love her anymore. Well, then fix it. What would be the solution? I'm covetous. Fix it. I'm immoral. Fix it. I don't love my wife. Fix it. Jesus didn't die. Go back to Ephesians 5, by the way. We love because He told us to. He commanded us to. Agape is a decision. The storge, the eros, the phileo, all that stuff can come and go. Agape is a choice. Fix it. Back in Ephesians 5, Jesus didn't die because the church was beautiful. He didn't die because the church did everything right. He died to make it so. Are you with me in verse 26? Actually, back up into verse 25. He gave Himself for it. Why did He give Himself for it? Because it was so loving? Because it was so personal? Because it was... Why did He do that? That He might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that He might present it to Himself, a glorious church without spot, without wrinkle, without any such thing, that it would be holy and without blemish. The point is, Jesus didn't die for the church because the church did everything right. He died so that it could be made right. He didn't die for the church because it was so beautiful. He died so that she could be beautiful. So don't think that unlovable qualities and imperfections prevent agape love. That's not why Jesus loved the church. It wasn't because of perfection, and we have our own imperfections, guys. And that has nothing to do with agape love. So make sure we understand that this idea of staying together, the unselfishness, the idea of loving God more than we love our spouse. There's the key. If a husband loves God more than he loves his wife, he'll do exactly what God told him. He'll treat her like he tells him to treat her. If a woman loves God more than she loves her husband, she'll do exactly what God has required for her to do. There's the key. For those of you that are unmarried in here, there's who you're looking for. You're looking for somebody who loves God more than they love you, because they'll do what they're supposed to do for you. Not perfectly, but Jesus didn't die for a perfect church. He died so that we could be that. How deep does this love go, guys? Look at verse 28. You love your wives as you love your own bodies. Verse 33. You love your wives even as yourself. This idea of loving as your own self, it means it's unlimited. Because let's be honest, that's how we love ourselves. That's not something that's we're wishy-washy on. We want to take care of ourselves. Our self means something to us. That's exactly how she is to be to us. It's an unlimited love. And again, that is a decision. That's a choice. So what are some applications we can make out of this? It's commanded. It's Christ-like. It's so unlimited, it's as if it's a requirement for ourselves. So what do we do with this? Make sure we don't take her for granted. Proverbs 31 we talked earlier this morning when we were looking at the work of the wife. Riches above rubies. Not a number can be calculated as to how valuable she is to be to us. So keep showing that continuous love. There's a joke. I heard it even before I got married myself. It was a joke. I take that back. I think it was a joke. But woman talking to a man, why you never tell me you love me anymore? I told you I loved you the day I got married. And if I ever change my mind, I'll let you know. I hope that was a joke. You know what else I hope? I hope nobody in here lives their life based on that principle. She has to know it. She has to be certain of it. And if she is not, guys, we have failed. I have failed. You have failed. And don't wash that away. Do something about it. Don't take her for granted. Reaffirm our dependence. Reaffirm, like we talked about this morning, our thanks and appreciation. Magnify the good and overlook some of those minor things. You know how you get through the big fights? You don't make everything a little fight. You don't have to fight about everything. You don't have to argue about everything. Some things, wisdom, just let it go. Be smart enough to do that. What about some of the key words? Nourish and cherish. Those are beautiful words in the English language. Even somebody who doesn't know English, it's just to hear the words, nourish and cherish. They just have a sound to them. They have a ring to them. The idea of feeding and taking care of. That's the words. That's what those words are saying. Turn to 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3. There's a lot hindered when we fail at this. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. 1 Peter 3, 7, likewise you husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, understanding, giving honor to them as the wife under the weaker vessel, as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. There's very serious consequences if we don't get this right. Being heirs together of the grace of life. That doesn't happen if we fail, guys. Having prayers that are not hindered. What does that infer? It means our prayers can be hindered if we don't get this right. So again, if it's something we're not doing right, then we treat it like any other sin, because that's exactly what it is. Turn to Genesis 2. And by the way, as you're turning there, just let me make one more aside, one more general statement. Guys, if we get this right, we love her as ourselves, We love her in the way God loved this earth and the way Jesus loved the earth and the way, this higher level where she is first, we are last. You know what will be really easy? Submission becomes easy. Subjection becomes easy when they know. And this was all for us. Remember, we're back in the garden. Day 1, this was good. Day 2, this is good. Day 3, it is good. It is good. It is good. Then you get to day 6. Adam is created, formed from the dust, and something was not good. What was it that was not good? It was not good. Verse 18. Genesis 2, it is not good that man should be alone. Marriage wasn't made for Eve. Marriage was made for man. It's not good that man be alone, and God fixed it. He fixed the one thing he said was lacking in creation. Marriage is for our good. Specifically, even in Genesis 2, for the man. And then we go back, we can read the last of that, leaving father and mother, cleaving to one another, two becoming one. It's a lifelong journey. And if we can get the love right, we can get the rest right. So get your songbooks out. Doesn't mean our marriage has become perfect. Doesn't mean everything's going to be agreed upon. Doesn't mean everything's going to... No, there's always things to work with and deal with and fight through. But when there's a higher level of love, where there is a decision-made love, you'll figure it out. And you'll work through it together. And so we're striving for that. Christ didn't die because His church was blameless. He died to make us blameless. He didn't die because His church was spotless. He died to make His bride spotless. So if there's anything spotting us, if there's any blame, if there's anything that we have to fix, do it right now. That's why He died. That's why the blood was shed. Let it make us clean again. Let it make us pure again. If you're not a Christian, just bluntly, you've never come into contact with that blood. You may love Jesus. You may know Him as God's Son. You may, by faith, believe He rules over a kingdom, but you're not in that kingdom. You can be. Don't just hear it, do it. Let your faith lead to confessing. Let Him be your Lord. Let your faith lead to repenting. Be sorry for the sins that caused Him to die. Let your faith lead to you be baptized. Not because there's magic in the water, but because you believe promises. And you know He's promised to forgive you and wash you clean there. For those of us that are Christians, covetous, what else? Fornication, adultery, lying, stealing, not loving our wife properly, whatever it may be, sin is sin. If we need help fixing it, then let's take care of it while we stand and sing.